Folks, good evening. Welcome tonight to our transition to online learning panel. Now, for access purposes, please make sure that you have your Zoom program updated. And if you would like to hear the sound on or make a comment, make sure your microphone is on. Towards the bottom of the Zoom software, you should see a captions option, and you can click that and turn that on. And there's also a chat box where you can enter any comments. If you have technical difficulties or any complications while trying to watch the program, please type those into the chat box and you will be helped. Again, make sure you have the most recent version of Zoom software. This panel can also be accessed by watching in full screen. If you're unable to see all the video panelists, you should see a PowerPoint screen and then a panel and then two white lines in between that. You can click on those two white lines and drag it back and forth to change the size of the PowerPoint and the video panelist. We also have a raise hand button if you would like to ask a question in the Q&A box. And this is Brian. Hi, just to let you know, there is no raising hand feature for this Zoom webinar. You can type your question into the chat box. The CSD team behind the scenes will gather those questions and go ahead and upload them to you and respond to you.
Also,
yes, if there's any questions, just go ahead and type those into the chat box. We will get those responded and get you taken care of. Thank you. Again, let me introduce myself. I am Joshua Mora. This is my name sign here. Slight pulling on the hair. I am also a professor at Boston University, and like everyone else, we have transitioned to online learning, and we reached out for support, and through that, this panel was formed. So I've got here Frank, Gabe, and John to share their experiences, and May to share their experiences with us. And so we'll start with May.
hello everyone. My name is Dr. May Kennedy, and I have many years of experience with instructional design. I have done some consultation work, and I live in Austin, Texas.
Fantastic. Frank?
Yes, hello, I'm Frank. I focus on curriculum and design. I also teach ASL online and at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro.
Now we'll turn it over to John.
Hello, I'm John Pironi. I teach at the University of Vermont. I teach ASL as well as coordinated programs.
Now let's move on to Gabe.
Hello everyone, I'm Gabe, and I teach at the California School for the Deaf in the Career Technical Education Department. I've been there for a year now. Also, it's very nice to see you all.
Yes, very nice, and thank you all for being here with us tonight. The goal for tonight's webinar is to have a conversation about the experiences that we've been having possibly over the last 2 weeks. All universities, high schools, K through 12 schools have sent everyone home, and all those students are focused on online learning, and it's been a tough experience. So we really are here to digest and have a conversation about that tonight. We are using tonight's platform as one of the many tools and resources that is a part of e-learning. We do have the floor opening up later so that the audience can ask our panelists their questions and share their thoughts and concerns. And of course, towards the end of tonight's webinar, we have resources to share. At this point, we'll be asking the audience a poll question. We'd That's fine. This is Joshua speaking. Probably because of the number of people that we have here, the number of folks here, the system is running a little slow, but we do see a high percentage of educators in our audience tonight. We have 4 folks here as e-learning developers. We have a student as well as a parent. Well, welcome to you all and thank you all for being here tonight. We've got a second poll question, which is a little more specific, so please respond to that. This is May. I just saw the poll results come up. And Frank says, well, it could be that they were behind your video window and then they popped up. Okay, we'll see.
Frank is saying, one question was regarding mainstreaming or deaf school, possibly.
This is Joshua. I see K through 12. Almost everyone there is above that. So that means we're working across all the different groups there. Wow.
Wow, May says.
And this is Joshua. Now I'd like to ask the audience another question. I'm really curious. Why are you here?
May says, it says one word, remember.
Right, it does say one word. Just give us one word as to why you're here.
Frank saying, I am wondering. May says, lots of different answers are populating. Wow.
This is John. This is going to be fun to watch.
It says, help, help.
Yes. Guidance, collaboration.
Support, curious.
This is Gabe. Mostly ideas.
Ideas.
Yeah. Ideas.
Support.
Help. See help out there. Transition help. Curiosity. What do we do on this transition? Technical support. People are asking.
Coronavirus, someone said.
Right.
That's true. That is why we're all here.
Joshua, right. Help. I see it again. Help. 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 Some folks are concerned. Students that lack the resources, the hardware, computers, and the internet connection, that is a big technical difficulty that we're going to have to go through. That means accessibility becomes an issue. And so access, that's the same reason we're here, for support. Yep, we're seeing it pop up. So we're at our first discussion question for the night. With this coronavirus pandemic resulting in a huge shift for our educational system, with millions of students and educators having to move towards online teaching, we're going to have that discussion tonight. With that switch, what has been your experience so far?
Amazing. Who should start?
Well,
here's Brian. Hi, I wanted to ask you all to just briefly introduce yourself, say your name and your position. If you could just say it again before you proceed. I know you have already.
Okay, this is Joshua. Why don't we do that again? Everyone go ahead and introduce yourselves. I'll start. I'm Joshua. My name's I'm here. And I am an ASL instructor at BU, Boston University. And I, like most of the audience here, have just had a giant teach. We're online now, and I'm not sure as to how to support my students. And so I'm here on the panel with CSD Learns, and we've got the experts with us so that we can hear from their experiences with online learning. So we'll start with May, please.
Hi, I'm Dr. May Kennedy, and I have my undergraduate degree in instructional design. I also work as a counselor at CSD Learns in their online course tied to STEM.
And Frank?
Hello, I'm Frank Griffin, and I mainly instruct art, and also I work online at UC Greensboro.
John.
Yes. Hello, I'm John Pirone. I'm an ASL Deaf Culture, Deaf Studies instructor, also a program coordinator at the University of Vermont.
And Gabe.
Hello all, I'm Gabe Lung. I teach at Fremont, California School for the Deaf Fremont, design and the career technical education. It's my first year as an educator. Before that, I worked 11 years at another university as well. Great to see you.
And this is Joshua. Thank you so much, everyone. Back to our question for tonight, discussion question 1. With the switch to online and distance learning, what have your experiences been?
Amazing. Just point who you want to speak.
Well, yeah, just raise your hand and then I'll select out of whoever raises their hand. But do you want to start me?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start. I did take an online course for my PhD program. That was a long time ago, though. That was by personal choice. The reason I chose that was for personal reasons, but now everyone is forced to do so. It's not a personal choice, so it's a completely different experience, I'm sure, for everyone else. Also, no one's prepared and you're not mentally set. You don't even know how to frame your courses possibly or how to structure your time. It's a major overhaul, I can imagine, that has to take place. Frank is saying, can I add something?
Go ahead, Joshua.
I agree. Really, that it all comes down to choice. Students are on campus, are offered that for a reason. Maybe that's their learning preference. As far as, maybe they want to be there present in class for emotional reasons. They need to be there physically, but there are also a long list of reasons why people would choose online learning. So I want to explain the difference between on-learn and distance learning. Online is when everything is set up. Online, students already have their expectations laid out. They know that things will be done through video, or all of the teacher's instruction will be done on this online environment, whereas distance is different. You have to make personal distance a priority because, say, of the coronavirus. So that causes extra stress. There are many students who have gone back home. Maybe they don't have great internet access. Maybe they live out in the country and they don't have any internet access. And so that makes watching video and have video streaming courses very difficult. So one of the most popular questions I am asked is, how can I satisfy my requirements when I cannot serve in person? Everything has to be online. So my perspective as an instructor, I see that this situation is completely different, and I don't think it's permanent, but it is important that we're flexible nonetheless. So I encourage students, not kids, but students, to also be flexible, to just calm down. We're in this together, because it is quite stressful. And while we're transitioning to doing this online, we have to think about our student stress. As we design our courses for the next few weeks, keep that in mind as far as what stresses they're having to deal with, also within their home environment and their access to this learning. So my main concern was finding out what their home environment looked like. I asked them if they have a computer at home and what that setup looked like. And the answers ran the gamut. So with each student, I asked, what does everything look like for you? I did a specific check-in.
This is Joshua. Go ahead, Gabe. Along with that is flexibility. Back on Friday, they decided to close the schools at the last minute, which was great for me because I had been teaching a Google Classroom for the last 5 years. And so we were able to just transition very smoothly. I have assignments that are online and project-based, and those are ready to go. So when my supervisor told me, hey, get some content ready before we close, I thought to myself, I'm already there, which was really nice. And I also just spoke with my students during the week, and I don't have everyday contact, but I do reach out to them frequently. And it's important to see each other. Again, online, we can see each other face to face. I see them at their homes, and I know that they're safe. And this week has been a good week for myself and my students so far. Hey, John, would you like to add on to that?
Yes, it's been interesting for me because I teach 5 classes. 2 of the classes are swapped, which means I am teaching everything completely on video. It's all online. And so those students are used to learning online through Blackboard. They can go in and watch the videos, and they're completely used to that process. However, the other 3 classes were not online. They were in-person, in-class instructional experiences. So I can see the difference between the 2 groups. Those 2 who have already experienced online learning, it wasn't such a tough transition for them. However, there was still a shift. My goal is still to help them learn sign language and improve their ASL skills through performing, through action. But having to figure out what that looks like in this scenario is different. Something I have to figure out. The other 3 courses face a different kind of challenge because they are not used to learning online. So that's actually extra work for me to try to figure out how to make things more simplified maybe and just easier process-wise for them, to not overload them and cause them more stress and challenge, as we've already mentioned. So it's interesting, the split between the 2 types of classes I have. The idea of distance learning is still a class that is forming, yet from afar, from a distance. I can't see my class. I have to help them and meet with them online, which is a challenge.
Yeah, this is Joshua speaking. There's a good question in the comments. Kyla says that some of our students don't understand how to use Zoom, and they don't understand how to log into the computer to do their schoolwork. So does anyone here have any thoughts, suggestions for this particular teacher and her students, and what type of resource you could share so
This
they can
is John.
take
I
it?
do. Just one idea is to download everything, captions with signs, so they can see me signing on the video, and then also I'm there along showing maybe the process, clicking along, showing the process as well, so that my students can see what I'm doing, record a video.
This is Gabe. I know an elementary school teacher that has already made videos with screen recording showing how to go ahead and enter Google Meet for elementary school students. That's one nice thing to do. Yeah, you have to kind of model that. This is Joshua. I also want to share some of the comments that are moving along in our chat box. Folks have said things like, it's a challenge to just learn how to use the new software. That could be bewildering for some folks. FlipPad and a couple other programs people are saying they're not really familiar with. Another good question that's here, the person is asking, how can we provide American Sign Language / captioned access to mainstream students on their online courses that are being produced right now? How can we support them? And how can we address social issues like isolation in this situation? That department is currently thinking about using a program called Camtasia, which allows a split screen so that mainstream students can see their lessons or have the instructor record those lessons, send them to an interpreter, have them re-recorded and sent back to a student. Are there any other suggestions for mainstream school students?
Frank is saying, it's tough because one of the largest challenges with deaf kids who are mainstreamed, they often are already isolated in their environment. And now with this, it's a double whammy. How can we make sure that we can bridge that gap, that social gap, and provide support in terms of maybe interpreting? Again, going back to screen recording, that's a great idea. And providing the interpreter with the materials so the interpreter can interpret during the screen recording as well. Then that screen recording can become a movie file and be downloaded to YouTube, which can be accessed anywhere. If it's locked in Canvas and you have technical issues, then there's no access. If you make the screen recording an option for the interpreter to interpret, and then create a video file of that. That will be then easy to share. And then any new material can be distributed easily at any size, and any media reader can read it and open it. Anyone without it, with a computer, can access it. So if you do a lecture, I recommend you look externally what's going out. If it's not accessible, then I encourage you to then do a screen recording, because it's so easy to share at a wide range.
This is Joshua. I imagine making your own content more accessible is critical. Folks have to think about that as well when they're recording any videos, to use accessible resources like YouTube, Vimeo. Avoid using those others like, well, Camtasia can be complicated, right? So maybe using the other platforms to record. Oh, I see. You're saying options, just having other options open. Yeah, it's good to have options.
Right. John's saying also there's Screen-O-Matic. Actually, I just used it for the first time for the last 2 weeks now, and it's been an easy experience. It's not that hard. You can add a PowerPoint and my own video of myself signing. It's easy to see. I can switch things around. It doesn't require much technical expertise. So I think it's a great tool, and you can manage it the way that you want as well. A third one is Novio, K-N-O-V-I-O. However, you have to pay a monthly fee, but it is quite simple to use. The negative is that you don't have any control. You just upload your PowerPoint and video, film yourself, and that's it. And then, whereas with Screen-O-Matic, you have control. You can size your videos, you can move them around. Camtasia requires more skill. Is that correct? Is that what you know? I really don't have much experience with it. Do you think you have to be skilled to use it?
I haven't used it. Frank here doesn't have too many editing features. You can take pieces off the video at the ends, like beginning and end, but nothing else.
Gabe is saying, I'm wondering about mainstream students who are isolated, possibly if there's a resource for them where, like for example, at CSD, California School for the Deaf Fremont, we have a relationship set up with an LEA resource with the schools so maybe look on the website and find various resources that are possible out there for deaf students to have contact with other peers. You know, like long ago, before the internet started, we had deaf World Wide Web, you know, with email addresses that were all listed out of deaf people so they could contact one another all over the world when the internet was a brand new thing. Same idea here maybe could be used. I'm not sure how successful it could be, but it's an idea, so that deaf people can have access to their peers and find other deaf students to connect with out there instead of just feeling isolated at home.
Josh,
I think that could build self-esteem as well. May is saying, I'll say something next.
Okay, one more question before we move on. There's a question in regards to copyright issues. In case some students go back home and they have textbooks or videos, I'm wondering how we can share that. Are we okay to make copies of those textbooks? Any suggestions or comments on that?
This is May.
Go ahead, May.
Yes, I've seen that issue come up often as far as how to address copyright. I think, you know, the whole world has shifted. No one's prepared for this. No one's ready. That is a very good question to address with publishers as far as how they can give everyone access to make it widely accessible. Because if that's the only material that there is and it's not available, maybe you have to video and upload it, or take pictures and upload that, but you have to find out if that's allowed.
Go ahead, John.
As a college professor, colleges have a specific group with a copyright. So if you're part of a department that purchases, say, textbooks or resources, you're included in that copyright policy or in that, and maybe you can ask them to clarify what the policy is. It all depends on the specific material, if it's a video or a book. So I think it depends. The policies can vary.
And this is a good transition for us. I'd like to ask what type of barriers you all have encountered in this transition to e-learning. Now, panelists, do you have any good experiences? Go ahead and share. Frank, we'll start with you, Frank.
I know copyright law has something about fair use of in their terms of any type of material. But many libraries always say, you know, if you forget this, it could, well, of course, that's not with what's going on right now because of this groundbreaking situation we're in. I think they'll become more flexible. So my recommendation is to contact your library, either your school library, where you're working, and ask if this is okay for fair use for learning. Because what I've seen over the past couple weeks, it seems like, well, now colleges and just the educational sector as a whole is not going to crack down on that because of the situation that we're in. There are millions of children, teachers, college students who are being forced to work from home without the resources they're not provided with. So that means with copyright, the rules being used with fair use of. That's something I would recommend because I'm seeing the trend shift that way with the flexibility until, you know, things die down and calm down, then maybe it will change.
Gabe, you wanted to make a comment? Yeah, I've had some barriers with students where their families just don't have internet access. And how do I support that? How do we support that? Should the school provide that internet service? That's a concern. I noticed most of my students have some access, but they don't all have them. 100% of my students don't have access. So that's a concern. How do we get that access to them all? This is Joshua. I'm looking at the comment box again, and it's populating comments, so give me just a second.
This is May. Josh, can I get your attention? Josh, do you see me?
I'm looking at that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. It is nice to share ideas and to give feedback. Like I can see in the chat, a lot of people are sharing some details for finding, you know, free online resources here and there. All of that is being shared with one another on chat. This is so great. This is nice.
Yeah, as I looked over, I could see that the chat box was just scrolling and scrolling. So there is good advice being shared tonight by the folks here. This is your space. This is your place. Please, John, go ahead.
This is John. Just thinking about barriers. Equity is another. Just like Gabe mentioned, some students don't have great internet at home, whereas other students have high speed, and so there's a disparity there that we need to be aware of. Also, some students come from a family that maybe where they have to take care of younger siblings or family members, and they don't have the time to attend a class. They have family duties. And there are others who are very experienced using computers and others that are not. There's also different types of learning styles, some who are able to learn online and others who are not. So that there is a disparity there. Just going ahead and proceeding with a full online approach, we have to think of that.
Agreed, John. And this is Joshua. There's also been a seismic shift in accessibility, right? We used to imagine accessibility as, in our field, at least a sign language interpreter coming into the classroom, but what does that look like now that things have shifted online? This means that universities and institutes institutions have to write new language in their bylaws to be able to accommodate that and be able to accommodate those services in an e-learning environment. Let's move on now to discussion question number 3. I'd like to ask the panel, like, for example, myself as an educator, the question is, what should educators consider in this new context of virtual work? Is there any advice on that? Gabe, go for it, Gabe. Go ahead. Oh, thank you, Josh. I teach graphic design for one of my classes, and that's more of an independent, self-oriented, project-based class where students learn how to assess themselves and how they see concepts. And on Friday, with everyone going home, it was a little strange, but the students know what to do. They already have their independent work. Again, we communicate via chat and email. We use Adobe Creative for approvals on their drafts. And so it's nice to have that access, and I believe the right software does help tremendously. Yeah, May?
When you said what responsibilities do we have? Wow, they're great. We have our defined roles have shifted because now we're working from home. So it's a balancing act of being responsible to make sure that my students are receiving their instruction in an equitable way. Like you said, there's a disparity. Find where those gaps are and try our best to fill them. Even if we're not an expert in that area, then to look for more resources, which causes more stress and more time involved to make sure that all of our students are receiving equal access to education. But one note I want to make: teachers who are parents themselves have another thing to balance. They have to balance caring for their students as well as being responsible for their children who are being instructed at home. A lot of parents have set up a schedule and they have specific times that they have to teach and they let their children do something else, but then that's using the bandwidth if their children are using the bandwidth, the internet at the same time. So, and if you tell your children not to use their internet while the parent teacher is teaching, then that causes more issues. What are they going to do with their time? So it's an interesting time for all, and balancing making sure your students are learning and your own children are learning as well. So that is something that we really need to consider as well, as far as how to balance all of that. It's a challenge.
John, it sure is. But Frank?
Well, I don't know, many teachers, I'm sure, are parents as well and have their own families. So now with teaching online, there's that added additional responsibility, like May said, for your own families. You have to think of, what can I do and what are the most critical parts that my students need to learn, is how you have to think about it. And it's important that I avoid doing just any kind of busy work, because now is not the time for that. We're under a lot of stress and pressure. So how can I make sure that the materials I'm distributing and the things that I'm teaching are really crucial and they will truly lead to learning? They're not just filling up time and space. I get handing over a lot of work to students, and not really analyzing that, but with all the pressure we're under and the fears with coronavirus, wondering what the health system is even going to look like in the next few months, I think we all need to just take a breather, and for the next few weeks, focus on what is most important. Focus only on that, on what is most important, and then there will be time for everything else to work its way out. So basically, do the best you can with what you have. Don't try to shoot for the moon, but don't try to do more than what you're comfortable with, because this is going to require a lot of work. We're going to have to roll up our sleeves and get a lot of hard work done, but it's important you consider what you're teaching and what's the most crucial part of the student's experience to make sure that their time is being used wisely and they're truly getting benefit from their time. There's not a lot of busy work or repetition. So again, do what you can with what you have. Just focus on now.
Give me just a second, John. We've got a question coming in from the audience, which I do want to address. Coming in from James McGintis. It says, how can we best fit concepts like math and ASL in a virtual learning setting? How do we accomplish that? Gabe? Well, you do that by sharing screens. You do a share screen and then you work on a whiteboard. And you can also be on video with them and sign to them, and then they can see that problem. There's Go Meet and a couple other programs. Yeah. And it looks like we're getting more and more questions, but John, go ahead.
I just want to add to what Frank and May said. Yes, I completely agree. I second what you say. As a father, I have a daughter, and there's a lot of negotiation that has to take place. My wife also has a job. We completely understand the pressures of this. But what's important is that you show your students that you're human. Don't set up such a hard and fast line, and just show, you're stressed, I'm stressed as well. We're all human. It's important that they know that, and that we're all working together in this. That will help bring a sense of relief to you. The second part is that it's really important you communicate with your students. Just like Frank mentioned, he assessed his students' needs and found their home environment in order to get a good idea of what's out there and what they need, so that you can match them where they are. I really think that that's priority, making things as easy, simple, and less stressful for them, and also for yourself as well. I was involved with a faculty discussion as far as best practices. One person mentioned the rule of two. Just like Frank said, name 2 of the most important goals that you need to accomplish in the short term. There may be 4 or 5, but you got to trim it down to 2. The 2 most important ones, and focus on that. Put that into your lesson plan. Those are the 2 things that they absolutely have to know, and then that's it. Keep it simple.
Right, May, go ahead.
Going back to your first question about figuring out ASL and the overlap of teaching that, you have to think of what tools that are accessible to them. Like you said, screen sharing, allowing them to do both of those things. So when you show something, you can show it on the screen and then sign it at the same time. Again, it comes down to what tools you have access to. There's a lot of advice that people can share.
This is Joshua. I also agree that it's really tough at this time because everyone has access to different tools.
Right.
Some folks also have a huge array of tools that they can play with, and some don't. Some are very minimal in supply of tools.
This is Frank. Can I just say one last thing?
All right, Frank.
All of us are forced to do online learning now, and so structure is important. Sometimes in a live class, we can kind of wing it, but when you're working online, you really have to be more rigid and stick to a plan. So it's really important for teachers and instructors to envision what the next few weeks are going to look like. I suggest, just like John said, it's important that you create an outline, make an outline, list out what your goals are, and then develop a schedule for the next maybe 2 or 3 weeks. That way students will see that and know what to expect, and then I know what my role is for the next few weeks. Because I'll develop a schedule which will then benefit my students and benefit me. I have a guide to help me envision how much amount of time should be allocated for my goals and how long I need to develop that. And if I plan that ahead of time, students will get that, and then they will know what that's to look like. Right now, there's no sense of structure. Online, having some structure will help. That's one less thing you have to worry about and stress about. even in face-to-face classes, you know, the longer you've been teaching, the more you feel you can wing it. This is not the time to wing it. I really encourage you all to develop a true schedule for the next couple weeks and build it as you go. Remember, work with what you have, work with what you can do. Just work it 2 or 3 weeks time at a time.
Right. This is Joshua. And in regards to stress, there's a good question. Judy Coriel asks, since we've been working virtually and been online, is there any way that we can get support? For example, if I can get a course design help to help us design courses, is that offered or is there a cost to it? Just curious.
This is May.
Go
If I
ahead.
can, I'd like to answer truthfully. At this point, I think that universities, well, in generally speaking, K through 12 and universities, there's more of kind of a handing over of what we have. A lot, you know, everyone's trying to figure out what they've been handed. There's a variety of teachers that have different students with different levels of skills. Some of them are able to, you know, build and work easily on their own. Others need more guidance. So just a word of advice, it would be nice if CSD could build a community where everyone can bring together and share resources in one place. Some have more experience in certain areas than others, and so everyone can contribute. And honestly, everyone, this is a new concept, you know. No one has, who is responsible for the cost of the design of this new concept? There's no direct answer. So check with your individual schools, see who can support you through that process.
Mm-hmm. Gabe, go ahead. Yeah, Josh. It's nice if schools could have resources where teachers could post their content in sign language, kind of like a YouTube for educators with the list plan, with the curriculum, and have all that posted ready so that students can refer to. I think it'd be nice to have a K-12 system like that where any other K-12 school could take that resource and use it. I mean, when we have to help each other out, we should. I know we know that historically a deaf institution or a deaf school knows best how to provide that access at the school, but we've got to think about how to put that now online so that it can be shared. And we could also help folks save money because they would live there online forever. This is Joshua. That's a good question. I think that's something that probably causes a bit of concern is how do we address the challenges and actually accommodate students' different needs? For example, we mentioned access at home is different because there are different time zones. There's also different technical expertise at home. And there's also new for the interpreters. It's a new interpreting situation as well, having to deal with the interpreter online. Do you have any suggestions into how to deal with that?
This is John.
Okay, John.
Yeah, that's a big discussion about face-to-face instruction of ASL transitioning online, where you can use Zoom or Whereby, or there's various Google Hangout or Google Meet. That's all fine, but let's suppose there's 1 or 2 students who don't have great internet access and then their picture is all pixelized and freezing. What do? Do you tell them, oh, don't worry about it, I can record it and send it to you to view later? Is that fair? Or do you have to just drop that and no longer do any kind of live video, but you record and submit your video to students and have them do the same to make it even? You know, how do you address that difficulty if you have a few students who don't have great internet connection?
Gabe, go ahead. For students that have slow internet, I mean, they may have that now, but after, let's say, for example, you can get together and study the signs. You can reach out to them and support them and provide that support they need. You know, initially, I know it takes more time in the beginning to go ahead and make sure that they feel like they're getting equal access, but you've got to put that time in at the beginning to make sure they have that support.
This is May.
Please.
I think just like Frank said, it's really important to check in with your students and see what their needs are before you decide how you plan to teach your course. I think you really got to hear out your students, what their challenges are, what their needs are, and then figure that out. The problem is how much time it'll take to accommodate everyone's needs. That's the big challenge. Let's say you have a student who needs captioning. How am I going to find the time to make sure that we have captioning available for students? Where do I find those resources? Do I hire someone to caption my course? There are specific people uh, that we need to bring in to meet those needs and to accommodate our students. But how do we find those people? Where do we find those people? It's important to take a pulse and see what the needs are first before you decide how to address their needs. But just like we said, it goes back to equity. How do we make sure everyone's receiving the same access, the same education? We have to be creative. We really, just like Gabe said, um, you have to take the time to do more for them. It requires flexibility.
This is Frank. Another suggestion from another school I was at a few years ago. I had a student who happened to have gotten sick, had to leave campus. I think it was a 6-week time period, not a full semester. So we were a little surprised at what to do. And they lived, of course, out of town with no online access, no DSL even. So what we would do is we would send our lectures, we would video them via USB. So there's another option perhaps to have to discuss, because sometimes in some situations we have to get really creative. USBs are cheap. They can save or store a lot of data, a lot of information. They're light. They can be mailed out. Now, they're not ideal for this situation, but we have students to think of, and we have issues to solve.
You got to think out of the box, May says.
We have to. You're right. Maybe it'll boil down to having to use a USB. They're cheap. They fit in an envelope. They're easily mailed. Sometimes it's the simplest idea that works. Maybe I think get a 64 pack on Amazon for $24. But there's an option. Another option, another idea that just came to mind. Well, let me just double check. Because I had notes because I forget easily, so I need notes. Quite often, I'm asked to do a synchronous presentation or sometimes asynchronous. So with a synchronous presentation, there's less control, because if there's a technical issue, you've got to put everything on hold. You've got to deal with the issue while you're trying to deal it. And if that technical issue continues, there's tough times with the tech issues. So in a synchronous situation, there's less control. Now, with tech issues, when we don't need technology, it happens to work just fine, right? But then when you need technology and you're depending on it, it freezes up. Murphy's Law. I don't know why it is that way, but that's the way it is. Another thing to keep in mind when we do online instruction is how much control do we have? With asynchronous teaching, like for example, presentations and the material, the course content can all be recorded on video, and then it can be watched by the students. And then those students can come back and have group discussions. So it would be irrespective of time zones. It wouldn't matter where they're located, and it could be accomplished that way. So we have to keep that in mind. Synchronous teaching settings are much more difficult because everything needs to sync up and line up in a sense. And with asynchronous teaching styles, that doesn't have to be the case. So I want to put that out there. So if you need to develop a lesson plan for the next 6 weeks, think about your format and which format that's going to be and what that's going to look like. Thank you so much.
This is John.
Joshua, oh, by the way, we are running out of time. So why don't we get John's comment? But before we do that, John, I want to address a question that came up here from Melweston. Says, if I prefer face-to-face teaching and I don't prefer online teaching, how can I tolerate it?
This is May. Well, my first reaction is, well, just like now, feels strange. I'm signing to a large audience and I have no connection with you all. I can't see who's watching me sign right now. So maybe that's the same feeling that you're saying. You don't prefer online, you prefer face-to-face. That's that feeling of disconnect and just being shocked. You know, we're being forced to do this. This is not by choice. So everyone just has to adapt and figure it out. And if I prefer face-to-face, then maybe you can meet face-to-face with each of your students throughout the day over, you know, video. And that way you're not overwhelmed too much by seeing everyone or dealing with everyone at the same time. So pick what's most important to you and what your learning goals are and meet with each student one-on-one. Yes, that requires more time, but maybe in the end, you'll feel like you actually made that connection. You just have to be creative and flexible in this time. That's key.
And this is Joshua. I'm so sorry. We do have to tie things up. This has been an amazingly good panel. And at this point, we do have a couple more questions that we haven't touched upon. Now, if there's any burning questions in the audience, now is your time, and we want to go ahead and open up the floor. Please use the Q&A box to go ahead and ask us your questions. We will respond to a couple, and then we will have to wrap things up for tonight.
This is Brian. Hello, everyone. We have seen so many fascinating questions and comments that are truly great. It's hard to filter through and choose which questions to answer. We're going to have to take time to do that. I want to thank you all for all of this. We are going to gather all of this, and we're going to have to just go ahead and wrap up our webinar now with some resources and tips.
This is Joshua. Okay, thank you so much, Brian. We're moving along to the next slide. I'd like to share some resources, and the screen share is so small, I really can't see the resources. Give me a second.
This is May. You will be getting a survey as well after this. And don't worry.
Right, no, the survey and the PowerPoint will be going out. And we have a little more information and resources to share because this is critical information for our audience.
This is John.
Please, John.
I set up a Facebook group called Distance or Remote ASL Teaching Best Practices. It's really important. It's really focused towards college, but there's great resources out there and some good discussion about different resources and reviews of them. So that's one resource on Facebook.
Yes, anything else, May?
Yes, John, can you spell that so that the interpreter can say the exact word, that Facebook group? Yes, the Facebook group is called Remote ASL Teaching : Best Practices. Thank you, says May.
All right, thank you.
This is Brian. The second link that you see here is New Ed Technology. They have really great tutorials, how-tos with a green screen, how to film yourself, how to do many various things. So if you have any other resources, please let us know as well.
This is Joshua speaking. We've got a lot of mentions in the chat box saying, remember to work with what you have. Don't overdo it. Just work in your means with what you have. And try
Gabe
to
says, I agree. Yeah, the video is...
Big one, Gabe. My students do a weekly evaluation, but it's a less than 1 minute weekly evaluation. So Friday, they know what they're doing all week long. We have a conversation about that. That way, they've got more self-reflection on that. It's really nice. Every week after that, they're able to look back, and then we also have a nice review. Really nice system. And we do that through Instagram. We have a closed Instagram group is where I'm able to do that. Really nice, says Joshua. That's such a big difference, face-to-face, in person. Sometimes some of those things can go by really quickly. But content is critical. keep your content. Try not to modify the content and have it look off. Just focus on content. Also, if you're not an e-learning expert, no worry. We will work together. And that was the intention for tonight's panel, is to bring everyone together so that we can have this conversation and continue it into the future. Thank you so much. Now we will wrap things up. CSD Learns will have another webinar on March 2nd.
Wait, you mean March 23rd, May is saying.
Oh, 23rd? I'm telling you, I'm having a hard time seeing here. And that will be a webinar where we will be discussing experiences people have with webinars. And also look forward to the release of the CSD Learns e-toolkit for online learning. It does focus in the STEM field.
This is Brian.
Also fill out our survey, which will be sent out. Please respond to us and share your feedback through that survey. This is a unique experience and unique times. It's been an immediate shift in our lives. And I imagine, well, I hope that we will have more and more webinars like this one tonight in our near future where we could continue this discussion because this is an ongoing conversation.
Brian saying, yes, we will. Frank is saying something about deaf and hard of hearing children who they have language problems. They're not able to access language. So there's a lot more to the discussion. I can foresee a lot of teachers who are here who are working with children, a wide range of children, some who have very strong language skills, but what do you do with children who do not, who come from a all-hearing family and no one signs? That's a whole other question to answer.
Agreed. So this Monday, myself and May, who's here, will be hosting another webinar which focus on the use of our toolkit. It's a STEM-focused toolkit, and we're going to see how that applies to distance learning and online learning as well. Thank you, everyone, tonight. This is Joshua. Thank you as well. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you. This is Brian. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all. And this is Joshua. Let me ask and double check. Brian, the PowerPoint will be shared, right?
Yes, with the survey, May says.
Okay. Okay, to the registered emails where it will be sent after the survey. Okay, Brian says, thank you, everyone. Have a good night and stay safe.
Bye-bye.